Before we continue our discussion with Brian Crowley and Antonio Fenza, look at the DeSantis-Trump money chase. DeSantis donors gathered in Miami last week. He met with them the day after entering the presidential race. A brief look at that part of the race. The money fight will be fierce between the two Florida political heavyweights. Joe Budd is a Republican state committeeman from Palm Beach County.
DeSantis has the early lead on money. Do you think he keeps it, or do you think the Trump fundraising machine will outpace him in the end?
I think DeSantis is going to keep the fundraising lead.
Budd founded but has since walked away from Club 45, a group supporting then-President Donald Trump. He's uncommitted for now, but acknowledges DeSantis' ability to turn out donors.
He did raise a record amount of money during his last re-election for governor campaign.
DeSantis, by most published accounts, has banked $120 million, but that's just a start.
There's a guy by the name of Hal Lambert who runs a hedge fund, and he's pretty much quoted as saying DeSantis is going to have unlimited Wall Street fundraising numbers.
A separate super PAC backing DeSantis, reports the New York Times, is looking for starters at a massive $100 million voter outreach in key early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina among them. The financial numbers are dizzying, but political pros remind us they guarantee nothing.
It's great to get out of the gates with a lot of money. You know, it's interesting, that's not always the final solution, because we saw that with Jeb Bush, blew through $150 million, and he was out by the end of the third primary.
So maybe a prodigious fundraiser. Antonio and Brian, we'll talk about that. Let's jump in right there, and then I want to talk a little bit about DeSantis' perceived weaknesses. The money game, it's the mother's milk of campaigns. He is very good on the fundraising trail. Can that help offset other aspects of his campaign, especially with these early, and I know you all emphasize rightly so, these early numbers don't mean a lot in polling, but they mean something. So at least money-wise, he might have an advantage there?
He might. There was a bit of a disturbing report from NBC on Friday that Ron DeSantis's gubernatorial staff, his office staff, is reaching out to lobbyists in Tallahassee, encouraging them to contribute to the campaign. Some of the lobbyists, in fear, speaking on background, told NBC's Matt Dixon that they feel like they're being bribed, that they feel like they're being bullied. A lot of the legislation that they have fought for over the last couple of months hasn't been signed yet by the governor. So imagine getting an email or a text from somebody in the governor's office encouraging you to contribute while you have pending legislation. They raise ethical concerns. These lobbyists are very, very concerned about what's going on. There's some suggestion that it may be a breach. They're not sure yet, but a breach of the FEC's requirements.
Federal Election Commission.
So it's the fact that any governor would use official people on his staff to reach out for money, that should be stopped immediately if it's true, which it appears it is, and it's a disturbing thing in his fundraising effort.
Antonio, to the money game, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, it's going to be really interesting. Look, going into a presidential campaign, regardless of who you are, what party, what year it is, the two big challenges any candidate has is name recognition and raising money. And DeSantis comes in a lot stronger than most candidates that I've ever seen come in, because he has raised that money and he does have access on, in the Rupert Murdoch media empire to all the different news outlets that they have, including Fox News, who was in town on Friday. But the issue still remains that he has, if the polls are correct, there's a deficit there with Trump. And then the question is, how do you beat back Trump's attacks? No Republican rival, whether on the campaign trail or in Capitol Hill when Trump was president, no one in the Republican Party that sought to challenge Donald Trump came away victorious. I mean, for the most part, they came away beaten and eventually either disappeared or left office.
And let me ask you.
So I think the question is not so much how much money you have, but how do you use that money to effectively swat away Trump's attacks?
And talk about, a political campaign is about policy, it's about personality as well. Talk about the DeSantis deficits as they're talked about either publicly or privately.
Well, because the issue right now is that he has policy talking points. But when you talk to a lot of the voters in that part of the Republican base, they don't get into a lot of the policy wonk details. They're much more interested in what Brian was mentioning earlier, that their candidate be a brawler, that their candidate be a fighter, that their candidate take on anyone and everyone they have to in defense of the common person, the common American, in fighting against American carnage and the swamp and the weaponized government. It's much more emotion than policy. And that's where Trump has always won the hearts of Republicans. So if the governor's plan is to go out and talk policy, which he can, and which he's got plenty to talk about, but that's not necessarily what this element, the primary voter, a big segment of the GOP primary voter wants to hear. They want to hear, are you going to fight for me?
And Brian, let's look beyond the race. Let's pretend for a moment. We have no idea what will happen, whether Trump, DeSantis, or somebody else. Look to next November, Florida now more of a red state, and sort of hypothetically talk about how a DeSantis, for instance, would match up against President Joe Biden.
Well, I think that it would be a very, very clear-cut choice on issues. Ron DeSantis is not shy about saying how he would use the executive power of the White House to accomplish things, just like he did in Tallahassee. I think he would very aggressively go after Joe Biden. I think he would, as he's doing now, he would push very hard on the idea that Joe Biden is not healthy and incompetent and not able to do the job any longer.
And the Democratic counter?
The Democratic counter is going to be that Ron DeSantis is an extremist. They'll point out the 6-week abortion ban. They'll point out his anti-woke stand. They'll say he's anti-business by going after Disney and some other businesses. They'll say that he wants to take over the FBI and make it his own personal army, like he did with some of the statewide law enforcement in Florida. I think they'll very aggressively go after Ron DeSantis and call him an extremist.
All hypotheticals at the moment. You got 15 seconds in this segment, Antonio. The brawl between Trump and DeSantis, quite unlike anything we've seen in Florida ever.
No, it's nothing like we've ever seen, and I'm going to tell you, but I think I would not want to be a Republican, a public official, or someone really involved in the party, because you're going to have to choose, and we've seen that both Mr. Trump and Mr. DeSantis can be somewhat, maybe vindictive, maybe, and you don't want to be in the middle of that, having to make that decision.
Well, the game is on. Antonio, Brian, we'll have your final thoughts coming up in just a moment.